All right, welcome back to Getting Past the Premium, everybody. Here with a buddy of mine. This is going to be a fun one, man. Shawn Fitzgerald with Sound Harbor Insurance. Shawn, how are we doing today?
Dude, I'm doing phenomenal, man. It was good to catch up with you before the call, and I'm excited to get into this one.
Yeah, it's fun. We're both in a couple different groups together, so we're talking about some of the pain we put ourselves in, but it's all good. It's all for the better. Um, But so you are a scratch agency, started your own firm from the ground up. So because of that, I want you to give a little background of who you are, how you got to where you're at with Sound Harbor, and then we'll kind of dive in.
Sure. So yeah, I started as a producer at a nationwide agency. Worked there as a producer for about 9 years. Started in personal lines, then started to dabble into commercial and see how nice those commission checks look, and then got hooked on commercial. But I
Mhm.
always did a little bit of both. And then around the 9 year mark, it just got to a point where I was getting a little older, starting to have a family, um, and starting to think about the bigger picture, right?
Yep.
And it just got to a point where I was like, man, to do what I want to do, I believe that I need to go out on my own and build it myself, which was a hard decision to do because I was at somebody who married into the family. I worked at their agency. So, it was close ties to the family, which was not a easy conversation to have. Also, too, not an easy conversation to have with my wife because, I was making over six figures and I went to zero.
Mm-hmm.
So at least we had a little money saved up. I was able to I was able to open up my own agency in 2020. About
Good year to do that.
roughly within a month of COVID hitting New York. So that was an interesting experience. But honestly, as most of you know, insurance did really well during that time period. And I wrote way more like my business plan was like 90% business insurance. And when COVID hit, it went to like 90% personal lines.
Yeah.
And then it slowly, right now we're about 50-50 personal and commercial, with a little bit of life insurance and benefits. But yeah, man, I mean, that's been the journey right now. So I started with no one. It was just myself. I didn't bring over a book. I didn't take out any business loans or anything. I just literally started from zero, called a few marketing reps that I had a relationship with from the prior agency. And I was just like, hey guys, can we make this happen?
Yeah.
And I got a lot of no's and I got a few yeses. And then luckily, you could say it was bad timing, right? 2020 before COVID, but look at how much harder the insurance market has gotten since then, right?
Oh
So
yeah.
I could argue it was great timing because I was able to get Progressive and Travelers and Liberty Mutual. And a lot of those people, if I was trying to do that now, I probably wouldn't be able to get them, you know?
Yeah. That's a
So,
good point.
overall, great, crazy time. But now where I got one producer with me, I have three virtual assistants, someone that cold calls for me. And that's the team. Like I said, about 50-50. We are trying to focus more on commercial and the personal lines we do. We are trying to focus more on like high net worth clients.
Mhm. Yeah, that's
That's
awesome.
it.
Looking back on that experience 4 years in, what would you say to somebody that is looking to make the same transition? What would you learn, or what was your biggest takeaway from your experience so far?
Yeah, I think even to today, I still struggle with it slightly. Is like having having like aggressive patience, right? Like you have to be aggressive, right? You have to be aggressive. You have to take risks, but you also have to know it's going to take a while,
Yeah.
right? Like truthfully, like I'm nowhere near where I want to be, but I'm much better off than where I was 4 years ago, But it took probably this was the first year where I was like, okay, man, profitability is looking fantastic. The team looks like it's going in the right direction. We're building relationships with our carriers. And that's 4 years. So, I'm sure in 5 years I'll be saying the same thing. But the point of that is it's going to take some time.
Yep.
So to have that patience, because I remember a week in, I'm already like looking at other agencies and like, oh, how did they get there so quick? And look at Urban Young and look at, Elliot Bass, look what they're doing. And I'm like, man, just relax, just stick to your plan, grind it out, and it'll come. And you'll learn lessons along the way.
Well, that's just it. I mean, it's very difficult to do, to do the comparison game, right? Social media's only
For
made
sure.
that worse, but I think you're right. I mean, the key there would be, having a plan, building a plan that you can stick to, but then, know that if you put your head down and do the work, you're going to get to the goal you want to get to. Um, and, and one of our coaches, Dan Martell, always says, and I was just reading it in a book, which I'm guessing where he got it from, but what you focus on expands. And I think that's what you're saying. Like, head down, focus on your business plan, focus on the things will work. And you're going to get the results that you want, but it just may not always be in the same time frame or whatnot. But I would also say, like, social media and what we see out there, like, everybody's also experiencing that same thing, right? We just don't
Yeah.
see it, and that I think about a lot, because, like, the other thing that I think it was like, every time, we get to a different level or we continue to grow, and, you get different challenges, right, as a leader, and it's just about leveling up. But at every level, you're like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing. Like, I'm just making it up as I go, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that imposter syndrome, right? And I think it's good to realize that everybody's in that same boat. We're all figuring it out as we go, and there's very few people out there that have it figured out and are just going to go and do. And so keep the
Yeah.
head down, and yeah, I like that.
100. And just to share one other thing, since we brought up our mentor too, one of the big things that I feel like what I would tell somebody new is to look at bringing on a mentor. And I'll just give you an example. For instance, so when I joined Dan Martell's program, one of the first questions he asked me is like, "Oh, what's your goal for the year?" And revenue wise. And I told him, I said, "Oh, 100,000." And within like a minute, he's like, "Why not 200,000?" And
Yep.
my brain instantly went to like, well, I 200,000, 100,000 is a lofty goal, like I'm already
Yeah.
like being like defensive in my own head. And then I just sat and thought about it for a minute. And I'm like, well, what would I need to do to get to 200?
Yep.
And I start mapping out a plan. And I'm like, holy crap, 200 is possible, you know? And
Yep.
then I talked it out with him. And it's like, sometimes you just need that person to help push you and help create that vision, And I feel like setting a goal, again, you touched on it earlier, is like, if you know your vision, you'll know what you can say yes and no to,
Totally.
So I think having that vision is super important because maybe you're not going to waste your time with this shiny piece of new technology, or you're not going to waste your time trying to get appointed with this carrier because it doesn't align with your vision of becoming a large commercial agent or whatever the case is. So I think having that mentor to help you think bigger, but also have the mentor to help you create the vision. I think those are two things I would add to that aggressive patience comment in the beginning.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. No, I
Yeah.
mean, that's so true. And one of the things similar exercise, but we had Larry Linney with Insight Performance Group. This was a few years ago, but we did it with our whole sales team, and I think it was June or July ish. There's about 6 months left in the year, and he had us do an exercise where it said, if most of our goals were around 100,000 or whatever, he's like, all right, gun to your head, you have to do it no matter what. How are you going to go write $300,000 by the end of the year? And so now you're like, oh man, you just tripled my goal in a 6 month time frame, And he's like, all right, we're going to spend some time. We spent, like, I don't know, 2 hours, like, uh, going and building a business plan to do it, basically. And you actually realize, like, it is not easy, but you start to think, like, it's possible, maybe, like, if I did that, okay, if I got one or two at this size and I did this and that, and all it does is it retrains your mind to think differently about the problem and about the scale of the problem, right? Because you're right. For every person that's writing $100,000 out there, there's a person writing $1 million out there every year. And so it's like, what are they doing differently? Um, and usually it's not that far off. Not as big as you think of a difference, right? And I think that's what's
Yeah.
cool about sitting down and doing those exercises. Um,
100%.
but so, diving into that piece of it, which is something that we talked about prior to the show, but we, are both in a couple different mentorship groups, coaching groups, big believers in having a coach. Talk through your experience and realization, because the coach that we're in, Dan Martell, is also not industry specific, right? He just coaches entrepreneurs and in a group setting. And so talk about kind of your progression to just even like realizing that investing in a coach would be something that's beneficial to you, and how you got there to think that way.
Yeah. Well, honestly, if none of you have done it, just message Dan Martell and say
Yeah,
business in Instagram, because he'll you'll see the whole way his sales process works. And
machine.
I'm not gonna lie, it got me. It was good. They ask questions about what you're trying to accomplish. They challenge those questions, and then they provide a solution. And honestly, it gets to a point, like, I feel like from the accountability side of things, you need somebody. For me, I like to have somebody to hold me accountable. you know? So I feel like every week, if I hop on those calls, I know I have to do my 5 daily tasks that I'm supposed to do. And if I don't, I don't feel good about it.
Yep.
So it's like, part of the investing for me and myself was also to, like, skills pay the bills, right? We all heard
Yeah.
that saying before. Skills pay the bills. And how do you build skills? You have to invest in yourself. You have to read, you have to work out, you have to hire a mentor, whatever it is, pay to take your CIC class, whatever you're doing. So I think for me, it just came down to, if I want to take other people on my team, like, so where I'm at in my agency is still fairly new, I would say under 5 years. And I have goals of wanting to scale and build a team. So for me to do that, I have to make sure I'm working on myself the best I can. Because I feel like, you know, the people who are going to want to follow me on my journey are people at or below me. You know, generally, a leader doesn't attract other leaders that are much better than they are. I mean, you can
Yeah.
in certain instances, depending on where you're at in your journey. But let's be honest, I'm still a fairly new leader. So I have a lot of work to do myself. So I feel like, and I always, I love the quote, I have it written down. I said it on the last podcast, is you can't help someone get up a hill without getting closer to the top yourself. And
Oh, wow, that's
I
cool.
just I just feel like that's where I'm trying to get at,
Mhm.
is what can I do to work on myself? And Dan's program was just one of those things, man. If I can learn how to build a better playbook, build better process and procedures, if I can create a clearer vision, if I could know what books I should read to enhance certain skills that I want to enhance, if I can make my physique better, if I can get sharper mentally. I mean, these are all things that are taught in the program that will help me become a better leader. So that's why I gravitated towards it. And honestly, he's got a good personality, so the calls
Mhm.
are entertaining.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's true. Well, so what's your perspective on it being non-industry specific? Uh,
I love that it's not industry
yeah,
specific,
I do too.
honestly, because I feel like there's a lot of coaches in our space now that's insurance specific, right? And they're great. They have niche specific ones, like if you want to do just commercial or sales or whatever the case is. Um, I'm just trying to think, why did I gravitate more towards? I guess you know what it is too, is like, I feel like Dan is in the process of building his business, so he kind of like practices what he preaches, right?
Yeah,
He tells you to post 3 times a day, well, whatever his formula is, and he's doing all of those things.
yeah,
And because of that, I feel like there's something. Andy Frisella does the same thing, right? So Andy will do 75 hard, his 2 workouts a day, he's sticking to a diet, all that stuff. And he's on the journey with you doing it. So it like makes you want to do it. And Andy is an extremely successful business owner, right? So like those are the people I want to emulate, right? Is I looked up to people like Dan, who've sold $100+ million business, Andy Frisella, who is building and has $100 million+ business. Those are the type of people I want to learn from.
yeah,
And listen, I'll just say it out loud. Like, there are some insurance coaches in the space that don't have $100 million business, you
yeah,
know?
yeah.
So
Totally. And I always look at it though. If I try to do this in anything in the world, right? Where you experience something that maybe is just a great experience, or you
yeah,
look at something like, wow, that worked really well.
sure.
I always think like, how could I, or is there an application to our business that I could
Yes.
could use with that? And it just,
Yes.
again, it helps your mind think differently about problems, because if there is definitely a space for all for coaches that are specific to the insurance industry,
100%.
100% think that. But I also think that we should give room for and we're talking about coaches, but really just any personal development in any area of your life. And then when it
Sure.
comes to business, it being, learning from somebody that's built a software company or built a service based company or, whomever the principles of operating a people business do apply, and you get a different filter for that
Yeah.
stuff as they come to you. And then it's more work sometimes to figure out how do you implement this
Yeah.
into your business, but it doesn't mean that the principle doesn't apply, right? And
True.
so that's what I've found very valuable is it just kind of makes you think differently about problems and not just do things the same way that everybody else might be doing. And
Very
sometimes
true.
you're going to be right, sometimes you're going to be wrong.
Yeah. And I have just to be clear, I have an insurance industry specific
Yeah,
coach and an outside coach. So,
totally. Yeah,
I
we
think if you want to sharpen up your commercial skills, you know where to go. You know who that person is. You want to sharpen up just sales specific, pick somebody else. But yeah, I would say it's a good idea, like you said, to go outside and inside. I don't
mhm.
think it can hurt,
Yeah,
you know?
that's a great point.
Yeah.
It's more of like a performance group, but Insight Performance Group is Larry Linney and his team. I consider them coaches and mentors.
Yeah.
Excuse me, around industry specific topics. Teaching you sales process and operational based concepts and stuff. And I think all those things are very positive. It can only elevate, your mindset and your what you thought is possible. And one of the things that I don't know who I've heard say this, but if you can get somebody's 10,000 hours of experience or you could pay for it or you can get access to it, I'll do that all day long because
Yeah.
I don't have to spend the 10,000 hours getting that experience and advice. And 10,000
Yeah.
hours is how long it takes to become an expert at any one thing, supposedly.
Yeah.
But the more that you can pull that off of people that have already become the expert and learn from them, the faster you can grow and do similar things. And that's what the power
100%.
of like coach or investing in yourself can be. Um, I just think
100%.
it's a lot of, in our industry, especially if you're a producer at a firm, for some reason, we don't look at that as like building your own business or your own book or something like that. It's really, I have a sales manager. They're gonna, give me the resources, the programs, the whomever I'm gonna go follow, and I'm gonna go do their work. And not I just don't see a lot of people that are out searching for their own coaching, their own success, their own personal development. I know there's plenty, don't get me wrong, but
Yeah.
you're putting yourself in a position to figure that out, right? By starting a
Yeah.
scratch agency. I don't know what
Do
your
you think,
perspective is there, but
yeah, I was actually going to ask you, do you think the leader should provide, like, pay for coaching for a producer if they're open to it?
um I would personally, as a leader, consider paying for the coaching. I mean, I'm not going to
Yeah.
tell everybody what to do, but
Yeah.
we do that a decent amount. Depends on um what it is and all of that, but I
Yeah.
believe that if you're going to have people on your team that you want to be successful, you need to invest in their success.
I agree.
And if you do and you invest in the right stuff, you're only going to see an outsized return ideally on that. But
Hmm.
um, I'm a big believer in paying for the right coach, paying for the right outside influence on your team
Yeah.
because again, sometimes just getting them in a room with other people that are actually killing it gonna
Yeah.
reframe what they think is possible too.
Yeah. And I think, it has to align with your core values, right? Like we
Yeah.
have one that's based around self-improvement, right? So I actually had dinner with my producer I don't know, like a few weeks ago, and I was telling him about the program we're in for the fitness one specifically. And he's like, "Oh man, that sounds cool." And he's a former like athlete, and he's like, "Oh, I would love to do something like that." And I was like, "Just let me know when you're ready. I'll pay
Yeah.
for it. Let's just do it."
Yeah.
Um, you got to start with a 16-day cleanse. I'm making jokes, but
You don't tell them
he,
that.
yeah, I probably should have left that out. But he's excited. He seems excited to do it. And now I'm like, man, how cool would that be if like I'm doing this fitness program, my producer's doing the program, maybe I get an account manager to do the it would just make for a cool culture. Um, and everyone would be shredded at the same time. So it'd be
Yeah.
awesome, you know? So yeah, I think it's important to invest in the team. From a knowledge perspective too, like we touched on CIC earlier. Um, I haven't figured out a formula of how to do it yet, but I think maybe you tie salary to it in a way like, hey, if you get your CIC, we'll bump you up to whatever level, you know?
Yeah.
Because I think there is something like you said to, help push them to the next level. And I think that's one of those things, whether it's education or fitness,
Yeah. What what so your perspective is you're already investing in your team and you think that's important to do, yeah.
I think it is.
Um,
Listen, I'm not going to lie. When you're starting a scratch agency, it's not, you don't have all these extra funds to be paying for
yeah,
coaches for people. But I think when you get to a certain point, um, and, your core value, if you have one around self improvement, continues to hold some traction, then yes, I think you should invest a little bit, you
yeah,
know?
I totally agree with
Um,
that.
if we at the end of the day, if you fully believe in somebody, right, on your team, I think in order to keep them, right? I don't know, I've only been in business 4 years, but in order to keep them, like they have to know and be a part of the vision, and you have to continually push them to be better. One of the one of the main reasons I left being a producer, I truly believe the more I thought about it, is I was just doing the same thing every day for
Yeah,
9 years.
yeah,
And I never really knew what the vision of the agency was. I never really knew what my next step was. It was all uncertain, and I think because there wasn't that clarity, I was like, okay, let me go make my own clarity, you know?
totally.
So
Yeah,
that's
and that
truly like, but now I think about that when I'm hiring people. I'm like, man, how do I make sure they're a part of the mission and they can see where we're trying to go? And how
yeah.
do I make them better during that process? I feel like if you can connect those dots,
Well, dive
for
into
me
that
so
a
far,
little
it's
bit.
worked.
Yeah. Like dive into what you're doing there. So what I think is really interesting about that is you're articulating the fact that well, we hear all the time that you need to paint the vision. People need to be passionate about where they're going and why they're coming in every day and doing the work is for, something that they get excited about. You're a great example of the opposite of that, of what happens if that vision is not painted very well.
Yeah.
Um, and it leads to a lack of motivation and some looking for something else, all of those things. What are you then doing today? Dive into that a little bit more specifically to connect that vision to the people you're bringing on board or recruiting.
Yes. So it's funny. I don't want to keep bringing up the prior agency, but like when I was there were talks of a vision in a sense like,
Mhm.
hey, yeah, we're just going to keep growing. But it was nothing specific,
Yeah.
and our buddy Dan always tells us about, being very specific. And that was one of the things I learned during the program is I could say, hey, I want to be one of the largest agencies in New York. One of the largest agencies?
Yeah.
When? How? What carriers are we going to grow? It's like being very specific. So
One
like
of how many? Yeah.
exactly. How big specifically? So, you know, I think just being very specific in that process, but also when you're explaining the vision to the specific team member, what is their process in the vision?
Yeah.
So when I'm having dinner with my producer and I tell him, man, I'm so pumped. We're growing. This is where we're at. We are gonna be one of the largest agencies on Long Island in the next 5 years, whatever the case is, right? And I was like, man, this is your part in it. And I'll tell him what his part is. But we're going to grow a sales team. You can be the leader of that sales team if you choose to be. And obviously, there'll be compensation tied to that depending on how the team grows, blah, 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 blah. Eventually, we'll get to, equity share and all that crap. But like painting the picture of what his role is in that vision, I think is the important part, right? For, for virtual assistants, obviously, some of that stuff is kind of hard to do. But for a
Mhm.
producer, account manager, you can definitely fit them in the vision, and you just need to explain that to them specifically. Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
Totally. Yeah, I
Yeah.
100% agree. It's a great point. One of the things I want to hit on is the be specific with the vision though too is
Yeah.
I think people don't do that because it's scary, right? And when I say one of the largest, I have an out. I've given myself a little out. If I say I want to be the largest or I want to be, a $10 million firm by this date, that it's very objective. You're
Yeah.
either going to get there or you're not. And um, getting specific is scary, but it also provides a lot of freedom, right? A lot of decision making, a lot of alignment around this is what we're all going to go accomplish, and we're going to do everything we can to get there. We're going to build plans off of it, because the clarity you get by being specific allows you to work backwards. By saying one of the largest, is hard to be like, well, okay, how much do we need to grow by this year to become one of the largest?
Yeah.
How many producers do I need to become one of the largest? You can do the math on, I want to be a $10 million firm by 2030 or whatever. Pull that backwards to be, this is what I got to do this year. Here's where I got to be. Here's what I'm comfortable with. Here's what I got to invest to do that. And if we do that, I think we're going to be on a pretty good path to get to that number.
Mhm.
And so I think people treat it as it gets scary, when in reality, there's way more value to have it being specific, and
Yeah.
put it out in the world. Like, get it to other people. Have them help you be accountable to the daily
100%.
activities you got to make to get there. And I
Yeah.
think that's people miss that part because it's easier. It gives
It's
you that sense of comfort to not have it
it's
be specific.
definitely scary. I mean, I think even when I said it to you, I think I even said one of the largest on Long Island. Yeah, the largest on Long Island. But yeah,
I wouldn't have called you
it
out.
it's scary, but it's also very difficult. I don't know,
Yeah.
for my personality anyway. Like when I sat down and thought about the vision, I was like, man, where do I $100 million agency, 250 million? Like where do I take this thing? And it took a lot of time to figure out,
Yeah.
and I'm still working on it.
Oh,
Every couple of weeks I go back in there and I see if I could touch anything up or enhance it or make it better. Um, I mean, I think it's something that always gets worked on and tweaked a little, but you have to have a starting point for sure.
yeah. I
So,
totally agree.
yeah.
There's a lot of visioning exercises you can do out there, but then to your second point there, very key point is understanding how well, and if you're a producer, how you fit into that vision, because that is going to
Yes.
be in those days of making, that 99th cold call, and you've had a really crappy day on the phones. Like, understanding that you're a big piece of something, creating something that gets you excited, is what's going to make you make that 100th dial, or whatever it is. Um, but then when you have a team underneath you, being specific about how they can help and how they fit in. This is something that I don't think have done a great job over the years, and we're working to get better at. It's always a work in progress, but um, you know, it's not only just a today thing, it's a constant reminder to that person, because they're going to evolve, the firm's going to evolve, and helping them remember, like, this is why you're so valuable here sitting in your seat. Because a lot of people think I'm just a number on the wall, and I don't. I just come in, I process claims, I talk to my clients, and I'm out. When in reality, not only are they important, but we do some really important work and some really important things for our clients. And um, helping people connect those dots is huge.
Yeah, I mean yeah, and I think you touched on it too, which is a great point. It's like you do have to constantly remind your team of what the vision. It's not like you say it once and you never bring it up again. I mean, I have lunch with my producer one because we're mainly remote, so like once a month we get
Yep.
lunch or dinner, and I would imagine I would say 11 out of 12 times the vision comes up.
Yeah,
You
that's
know,
awesome.
it might get a little annoying, but I think it is important to remind them.
And you're bringing your meal prepped lunch, right? Your meal prep dinner.
Don't tell Alan.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Yeah, we
Oh
do our
man,
best.
but yeah, the reminding's a big part too. And there was something I wanted to add to that. Reminding them about the vision, how they fit in the vision. I'll remember later.
Yeah. Yeah. So are you doing regular, like, review meetings and things like that?
Yeah.
So you can
So
have those discussions
because my team is like,
all
I don't
remote.
even want to say hybrid because we're remote 99% of the time. Meet with, so I have a assistant that helps with my emails, a calendar, which Dan teaches us how to do.
Yep.
I have an assistant that I meet with once every day for about 15, 30 minutes max. The producer, I kind of talk to my producer, I would say every day, but we have a scheduled meeting every Monday and then a lunch. once a month or dinner. And then the VAs I have, we hop on a team call once a week. And that's how I kind of stay in touch with everybody. And, I think too, especially in a remote atmosphere, it's hard to keep that like relationship with the employees, So you have, me personally, I feel like you have to stay in touch with them at least minimum on a weekly basis.
Oh yeah.
So like you said, they remember the vision, they remember who you are.
Why they're doing
And
it.
I feel like that's part of being a leader too, is like knowing what your employees like to do, what's going on in their lives. Can you help them with anything? So I feel like you have to build to be a good leader too. I feel like you have to be invested in the relationship with your employees.
Absolutely. Well, and there's a lot of ways to do that, but one you mentioned is a big one where you just build that deep relationship, meaning you know a lot about them, you know their interests, you know their what's going on in their life, and then the random acts of kindness or whatever you want to call it, but picking up something that they said or did, and then because you know them well, doing something that is going to be meaningful to them around that is huge. If
Yeah.
they have a beloved dog, and they're like, oh, we were celebrating the dog's birthday, like send them a little doggy treat or something. I don't know,
Yeah.
one of the doggy cookies, like $5, right? And it will
Yeah.
mean something way more than a bump in salary. And I think we obviously this conversation is going to get into like have to have competitive salaries and all that stuff that take that off the table. But assuming we do, I think we're getting into an environment like a very tough labor environment, right? That we have to be able to keep people around and keep people here and keep them invested in what we're doing. And not only is the vision an important part of that, but what you're just talking about, because you have to be able to continue to build that relationship with your team members, and little things like that can be a big part of helping. But communication is probably what you're mentioning is most key. Just regular. Go ahead.
Yeah, yeah, no, yeah. Communication is a big one. But I don't know. I think it ties all into leadership, right? Like because the labor market is so competitive right now, I do feel like people want to be pushed to the next level and they want to be following a certain vision. I mean, look at Gary Vee, look at Patrick Bet David, look at companies like Andy Frisella has or Dan Martell. These guys all have an enormous following and team. Obviously, they have past successes too, but their leadership ability and communication, like you just touched on, is through the roof. All those guys
Yeah.
have amazing communication and are amazing leaders.
Yep.
You know, I mean, listen, I'm not gonna lie. Part of me would be like, if they asked me to join their team, I'd be like, I'd think about it. you
Right.
know, so it's
Yeah.
like, it, I feel like you said, to be competitive against some of these other agencies, you need to think outside the box. You have to build those strong relationships. You have to communicate your vision. You have to stay top of mind. It's not easy, but I think all of us need to do, agency owners need to do a better job, me including, of building our skills of being a leader.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And
You know,
I don't know if he said it, but I heard it from Randall Stutman, who's I mean, one of the best leadership advisors in the country. But he told me leadership is not rocket science. It's a lot harder. And when
I like that.
I was like, yeah, that's pretty spot on. And just from the standpoint that you're working with people and everybody's different, and you've got to figure out how do you align a disparate group of people around a common goal and help them work towards and do the things that we may not want to do on a given day, but
That's a great
that
point.
will push us towards that goal. And there's just a lot that goes into it, and I think anybody that's building a team can benefit from continuous development from a leadership perspective, because nobody's got to figure it out. But uh, there are a lot of resources out there, and I think going back to what we originally started talking about, just around coaching and mentorship and things like that, finding somebody that is at a position that you want to be at or has the expertise that you want to be at is a great person to try to get feedback from, try to get input from, you know, become a mentee too. So I think everybody should be considering that. And I don't think we should wait for other people to bring, like a sales manager, a leader, an agency owner, to bring us those solutions. Seek them out, and invest in them if in yourself if you have for invest in them by yourself if you have to.
Yeah.
Because it only helps you improve, sell more, build your book of business, all of those things. Um, I'd be curious, shifting a little bit, your perspective, building a firm versus being a producer. Um, what are the main differences, right? Like, because you started out and you're
Everything.
like, you're just selling, but
Yeah.
there's a lot more that goes into it. But
Oh
also
my God. Yeah.
talk to those people out there that are in that position, and what you're what you think would be different if you did it again.
Yeah, I'm hesitant to say because it might not be motivating, but it's way harder than you think,
Yeah.
right? Um, it's also, I mean, listen, producing is part of it, right? But it is a small part of it. And one of the things I would say I am not the best at, but I'm getting better at and working on is building relationships with others and having
Oh,
good
yeah.
conversations and following up and doing all the things you said before, Elliot. And that's a huge part of owning a business is building those relationships in the community with carrier reps, with following up with old client, whatever the case is. Like that's a huge part of it. So I would just say in words, I don't even think I could explain how difficult it is. Um, but anytime you're trying to take a step to the next level in whatever position you're in, you're going to sacrifice a lot of stuff. Um, and when you have a family, it's extremely difficult to at the end of the day, let's just be honest, we're all sacrificing time to a certain point with our family, especially when we're first opening a business. Those are conversations I would say if you're in a position as a producer and you're thinking of opening up your own agency, talk to your significant other and have a very
Mhm.
thorough
Yeah.
conversation of what the next couple of years might look like because
Be
it's
on the same
it's
page.
not going to be a cakewalk, that's for sure. Um, but I would say if you do have a huge vision and you think you can be a leader and you can drive people towards that vision and you're willing to wait 10 years,
Yeah.
then I think you can go ahead and take the jump. But it's definitely there's no other way to say it except it's the hardest thing I've ever done.
Yeah.
There's nothing that even comes close to it because you could say we got it all figured out, Elliot, right? I got my mentor, I got an outside mentor, an inside mentor, I know the vision. I could get slapped in the face tomorrow with a fire and not know what to do and be upset and come home late and now I miss my kids going to bed and now the wife's upset and it can it's full of unexpected events. Let's
Yeah.
just put it that way.
Oh,
Being a business owner, it does get easier in time. I do feel like slightly.
grow
At least
calluses. That's what it is.
yes, you build your schedule a little bit more efficiently over
Yeah.
time. But those first few years, man, it's kind of like having a kid. You can't really explain it to anybody unless you go through it, you
Yeah.
know. But it's
That's
not
definitely.
easy, and it's completely different than being a producer. And I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy.
But everybody should do it. No,
But of course I do. Yeah.
I mean, that's a great way to put it. And it's hard to describe. Obviously, I've never done it from scratch, and I think that is a whole different ball game. Um, but you do learn over time, and I say growing calluses, but you deal with different situations and you learn and you grow. It's like it's no different than first time you have a claim and you're like what's gonna happen? Is this you get scared? Is it gonna be covered? Is it not? All those things. And then after a while, you're like, oh yeah, that's they'll be covered. This will happen. Here's what to do, and you move on. It's easy. And because I think about from a people perspective, we've when you have people turnover and you lose a key person or whatever, and in the first few times you go through that, it's tough. It's like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? Like now I got to shift this and move that, and I'm gonna have to jump in. And how do I find somebody? And after a while, again, you kind of learn what works, you learn what doesn't. You learn it's not typically as bad as you initially think it's going to be. Now you might have to do a lot of work and you might have to, figure a lot of different things out, but knowing that you've been there and done that and that you can get through it makes it a lot more comfortable to work through those.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. And I think too, like, I think too, it's important. let's say you have a producer who is entrepreneurial, right? I feel like most producers have a bit of an
Yeah.
entrepreneurial spirit, right?
Oh.
So I would sit down with my producer, and if they're a rock star, and say, and I like working with them,
Mhm.
listen, there is a path of equity available if you'd like it, but this is all the responsibilities that comes with. Do you even want any of those responsibilities? And see
Some
what they
people don't.
say. Yeah, because I could tell you when I had a talk with mine, oh, I don't want to talk to carrier reps. I'd rather be out selling this and this and this and this. Oh, I don't want to deal with this tech company and that. Oh no, I don't want to do any of that. Like, no, I don't enjoy any of that. And they might just tell you straight up, but at least you find out,
Yeah.
you know.
And then
And
you
maybe they
find
say,
the
oh,
other
I would
way.
love that. You know, oh, being a team leader of other salespeople, I would love to do that. You know, when I played hockey, I was the coach, and I loved getting the guys fired up and all that stuff. And I was like, okay, so that's a role and responsibility he would be willing to take on down the line, you
Yeah.
know? So I feel
No,
like communicating with your employees what it actually entails too, you know?
be open. Yeah. And make sure you do. I mean, most people that when, well, anything that you haven't experienced, personally, you don't know what actually goes into it, what is going to be required. And I think the equity and the ownership, part of that conversation in our industry can be a slippery slope because
Sure.
once a producer, if a firm has that path to equity, and using the producer example, if a producer gets to that point and they become an owner, a lot of times it can result in what we call entitled ownership, meaning kick my feet up on the desk. I made it. I'm an owner now, and we've had to have several direct conversations with our ownership group over time of saying the day that you bought ownership should be the most stressful day of your life because you just created a bunch more responsibility. You now have the responsibility of 60 plus families at our firm that are relying on you as a leader of the company and as an owner of the company to make sure that they have their families are taken care of. And our clients now, you're not, it's not just your book of clients now. You've got to think about all the clients. And so you should have that more responsible owner mentality that now you
Yeah.
are responsible and helping to drive towards that vision. It shouldn't be all stress, right? It should be an excitement around the vision that we've created, and you should certainly not do it if you don't agree with the vision. But I think that's a big piece in the industry that I'm glad you kind of walked through.
Yeah.
Um, so before we wrap up, tell everybody about your podcast, Scratch Agency. They all need to hit it. Tell them a little bit about what you guys talk about on there.
Yeah. So come listen to us, Scratch Agency podcast on Spotify, Apple, and YouTube. And it's basically me and my buddy Steven Turnbull, two scratch agents from New York. And we just talk about all things that scratch agents go through. You know, we talk about mentorship and different technologies that are out and what to look out for in the future and
Yep.
what not to waste your time on and all that type of stuff. And, how to be more efficient as an agency owner. Like we dive into all the topics and we bring people on who are smarter than us on those topics, just to give you guys a heads up. You could also join us on Telegram. If you go to our website, scratchagencypodcast.com, you can click on the little Telegram button and it's a free group. You join it. And there's a bunch of people in there, Brett Youngs of the world, people who just started Scratch a week ago. And we just have good conversation in there about different topics that people are going through. So
Yeah.
that's what we
Awesome.
got.
No, that's great. And you guys have a great show. So I want to make sure we hit on that. And
Yeah, thanks for having
any,
me on, man. This was fun. I feel like
yeah,
you and I should have connected a while ago, but it's all
I
good.
know, man. I know. We'll have to do it again because a
Yeah,
lot of things we could keep hitting on, and just love talking to you, and I love what you're doing, and so
thanks, man.
uh, keep it up, and we'll have to do it again.
Sounds good, man. Thanks for
All
having
right.
me on again. I appreciate it.
Thanks, man, and see everybody next week.